Does that buy a wife, or only the chance to hear her answer?
Move your boot off her valise first, Peregrine, Watson said, keeping the $100 pinched between his fingers. Webb Cassidy reached for the greenbacks while Verity Parrish stood at the stage steps, one hand gripping the rail and her valise trapped beneath Webb's boot, as a ring of cowboys watched him sell the claim he said he held over her. Verity looked past the money to Peregrine. Does that buy a wife, or only the chance to hear her answer? The yard went quiet enough for Peregrine to hear a harness ring strike the hitching rail. He had come to Las Piedras because the notice at the eating house had promised women willing to marry. Watson Ranch had 8 hands, 40 remount horses, and a kitchen that defeated every man who entered it. A wife who could cook, he had told himself, might bring order to the one part of his property that resisted ledgers and schedules. Then he had found Webb standing between a stranded woman and the stage calling her travel debt, an understanding any husband could take over. The late spring sun pressed on the yard. Dust whitened Verity's hem. Her fingers were clenched around the rail, yet she held herself straight and watched Peregrine, as though his answer mattered more than the money. Webb wore a coat too fine for the yard. He had arranged the notice, the fare, and this ugly little show. $50 for her passage from Tucson, he said. The balance for board, and the trouble she caused after breaking our understanding. Any man who settles it may carry out the bargain she refused. Peregrine did not look away from Verity. Was that bargain marriage? It was understood. That was not my question. Men shifted at the fence. Webb's smile thinned. Peregrine had brought the money from the reserve he kept for winter hay and replacement stock. Losing it would be felt long after the dust from this yard settled. He still did not lower his hand. Give her the valise, he said. Webb's jaw tightened. You have not paid. Then you have not sold anything? The word made Peregrine dislike the scene more. Webb was not conducting a lawful sale. He was using a trunk affair and a public crowd to make refusal costlier than surrender. Webb dragged his boot away and shoved the valise across the boards. Verity caught the handle before it tipped from the platform. Only then did Peregrine pass over the money. He stepped half a pace to one side, putting his shoulder between Verity and the nearest onlookers without touching her. That clears the fare and board you claim, he said loudly enough for the yard to hear. It buys no marriage. It gives me no claim on Miss Parrish. Webb counted the bills twice. You came looking for a wife. I came looking for an arrangement between 2 willing people. Peregrine's gaze hardened. This is not one. He turned to Verity. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes remained steady. The next stage for Tucson comes tomorrow, he said. I can purchase you a seat. The eating house has a room if you would rather stay in town, or Watson Ranch needs a cook for 30 days. You would have wages, a room with a key, and enough money held apart for your fare when the month ends. You may choose none of those and still owe me nothing. Verity looked from the open yard to the road beyond it. If I take the work, when may I leave at the end of the month? Sooner, if I fail the terms I have just named. And I am not going there as your wife. No. The answer came easily. What did not come easily was the small shame that followed it. An hour before, he had mistaken sufficient cash for a decent arrangement. Verity drew the valise close to her skirt. I will take the wages, she said. I mean to earn my own way out of Las Piedras. My buckboard is at the livery. She chose the wagon herself and climbed without being guided. Peregrine set her valise beneath the seat. At the high step, he offered his hand. Verity considered it, then placed her fingers in his. Her grip was cool and brief. He released her before she had to ask. The drive to Watson Ranch took an hour and a half over a rutted road running through mesquite and stands of saguaro. At the halfway barrel, Peregrine watered the team and passed Verity the canteen. He did not question her about Webb. He had already seen what happened when a man decided he was entitled to her answers. She drank, returned the canteen, and looked toward the mountains. How many men do you feed 8 most days? 10 when a driver or freighter stays over. How many do you tell the cook to expect? Peregrine glanced at her. 8. That may explain some of your trouble. It was not quite a joke. The corner of her mouth moved, and for the first time since the yard, he saw what her face might look like when no one was bargaining over her future. Watson Ranch sat low against the desert, an adobe house, a shaded porch corrals, and remount pasture beyond the water tanks. The bunkhouse roof was sound, the gates straight. For 12 years, Peregrine had kept everything under his care from failing through neglect. The house was another matter. He carried Verity's valise to a small room beside the kitchen, then stopped at the threshold. "May I put this inside?" She looked at him, perhaps surprised he had asked. Yes. He set it beside a narrow bed. The room also held a washstand, a chest, and one window facing the wagon road. He opened the door again so she could see the latch from both sides. "This key is yours." He removed a brass key from his ring and placed it in her palm. "Your wages will be entered each Saturday. Your stage fare will remain in the iron box in the parlor under your name. It will not be taken from your pay." Verity closed her fingers around the key. "What are the rules of the house, Mr. Watson? Supper at sundown. No waste of flour coffee or lamp oil. And this door," Peregrine looked at the threshold between them. "I knock. I do not enter unless you ask me in." She tried the key, opened the door, and tried it again. Some of the tightness left her shoulders. He showed her the kitchen. It was clean, but not welcoming. Tin cups sat wherever the last man had left them. The canisters bore no labels, and the single intact plate stood behind 3 chipped ones as though it had been hiding. Verity opened a cupboard. "Where is the salt?" Peregrine removed his hat. "I can tell you the age, feed allowance, and shoeing date of every remount in the North Corral." "That was not what I asked." "No," he admitted. "I do not know where the salt is." A laugh escaped her. She covered it at once, watching him as though she expected the sound to cost her something. Peregrine found himself wanting to hear it again. "The kitchen has defeated better men than me. You need not spare my pride on its account." She searched 2 more shelves and discovered the salt in a coffee tin. "That is either poor organization or a warning. Likely both." He left her to arrange the room as she pleased. Before crossing the yard, he filled a clean pitcher at the pump and set it outside her room. He knocked once. "Water?" "I will be at the corrals." "Thank you," she said through the wood. The thanks did not sound like payment. He was surprised by how much that mattered. Gus Rogers returned from Las Piedras before the evening bell. The foreman came to the kitchen door with dust on his hat and a folded note in his hand. He looked at Verity, looked at Peregrine, and wisely kept whatever first question had risen to his face. "The stage driver brought this," Gus said. "Cassidy says the northbound buyer is holding the order for those 4 remounts. Says we are sheltering a woman who broke a promise." Peregrine took the note. Verity held out her hand. "It concerns me." He gave it to her. Webb's writing ran hard across the paper. He claimed Verity had accepted fare under an understanding of marriage, that she had damaged his standing by refusing him, and that Peregrine must either complete the marriage or send her back before the next stage. Verity read the page once and laid it flat on the table. Her fingers trembled only when she released it. "He promised me work in an eating house," she said. "When I reached Tucson, he said the fare had made me beholden to him. He offered marriage as the only payment he would accept. I refused. He kept my valise blocked the stage and called the men over as though one of them might take his bargain from him. Peregrine rested a hand on his belt. Anger rose in him with a clean, familiar heat. "I will ride into town." No. The word stopped him more surely than a raised gate. Verity stood with both palms on the table. "If he comes here, keep him outside. This is your land, and I am asking you to keep him from crossing onto it. But what I promised, what I owe, and whether I marry are mine to answer." Peregrine could have ended the matter with his size, his money, or the regard men in Las Piedras had for his name. Doing so would have made him another man arranging her future, while calling it help. "I will hold the gate," he said. She gave one short nod. "Then we understand each other." Her gaze moved to Gus. "Now I need the storeroom count, the number of men expected at supper, and the days the stage may leave a driver here." Gus looked at Peregrine. Peregrine folded his arms. "You heard Miss Parrish." By the next morning, every sack, jar, and tin in the storeroom had been moved, counted, and put back in an order Peregrine could not yet follow. Verity found him at the North Corral examining the hoof of a rangy roan gelding. "Mr. Rogers says I cook for 10, she said, holding a slate. "Your freight count allows for 8. Peregrine lowered the horse's hoof. "Gus counts unexpected company. I count men on payroll. Beans do not care which kind they feed." He wiped his hands on a rag. "What do you require?" "The storeroom key." "A count by noon of anyone expecting a late plate. Notice before a driver is promised supper, and the right to change the meal when the stores demand it. If the flour runs short, the men will blame you. Then they should know the decisions are mine." There was no flourish in her answer. She was not asking to be praised. She was asking to be trusted with the work for which he had hired her. Peregrine drew the iron key from his pocket and held it out. "The kitchen stores are yours for the month. Tell me what you spend and what must be replaced. I will not alter your decision in front of the men without speaking to you first." Verity took the key and hooked it at her waist beside the room key. The small weight of iron and brass changed the way she stood. That evening, the supper bell rang exactly at sundown. The hands entered by twos washed at the pump and took their places along the long table. The smell of beef onions and hot biscuits drew the last man in before Gus could call him twice. Peregrine filled a plate and moved toward his usual place beside the back door. He had eaten standing for so many years that the habit felt as fixed as the desert hills. Verity had placed the one unchipped cup at the head of the table. "I kept that place for you," she said. "I would rather you eat while the food is hot than stand there watching whether everyone else has enough." Peregrine looked at the cup. It was a poor little thing, cream-colored with a faded blue line near the rim. No one had set a place for him in his own house since his mother died. He sat. Conversation stopped for half a breath, then resumed with unusual care. Gus reached for a third biscuit and guided it toward the pocket of his vest. Verity did not turn from the stove. "There are 2 for every man, Mr. Rogers." Gus held the biscuit over his pocket. "The air's dry. Baking vanishes faster here. Then tomorrow I shall count at the climate as a 9th hand." Gus returned the biscuit to his plate. A few men laughed. Peregrine lowered his eyes to the unchipped cup so no one would see his smile. The meal was only hot and sufficient. Before the bowls were empty, Peregrine had heard which trough leaked, who would ride late, and which stage team would arrive before dawn. Sitting still had made the men remember what needed saying. Verity had done in one supper what Peregrine's list had failed to do for years. The next evening, he moved his North Corral inspection forward by half an hour. He told himself the bay mare needed daylight for a proper look. The truth was that he did not intend to arrive after Verity had cleared his place, 2 days later, dust rose beyond the main gate. Webb Cassidy drove a hired buggy with a stage line clerk beside him. Peregrine saw them from the corral and crossed the yard without hurry. He left his revolver in its holster. At the gate, he placed one hand on the top rail and stood in the road. "Open it," Webb called. "I have come for what is owed." Verity stepped onto the porch. Her work dress was dusted with flour at the waist. She stopped beneath the shade and looked at Peregrine. He waited. She gave the smallest nod. Peregrine faced Webb. "You will remain on the road unless Miss Parrish asks you in. She is my promised wife." Webb's voice rose for the hands near the corral to hear. "And you paid her debt before half the settlement. You took the bargain." Peregrine's anger pulled tight, but he kept his hand on the gate. This was the part Verity had given him. He would hold it, and no more. Verity came down the porch steps and stopped well inside the yard. "I promised no marriage," she said to the clerk. "Mr. Cassidy offered work and changed his terms after I had traveled. Mr. Watson paid the fare and board Cassidy claimed. I am employed here for wages. I have a room key, and a day my employment ends." The clerk shifted on the buggy seat. Webb's face reddened. "You accepted my money," Webb said. "I accepted passage for promised work. I did not accept you." For a moment, Peregrine thought Webb might climb down. His own body settled for it, feet firm in the dirt. But the clerk caught Webb's sleeve and spoke too low to hear. Webb jerked the reins instead. "The order for 4 remounts is gone. The Tucson supplier will want cash before he loads another sack for Watson Ranch. Let us see how long principal feeds men." The loss struck where Webb intended. The $100 had already thinned the winter reserve. 4 unsold horses meant less money for feed before the dry months ended. Peregrine did not look toward Verity. He would not make the cost into a rope around her. "The order is yours to spoil," he said. "Miss Parrish is not." Webb wheeled the buggy around and drove back toward Las Piedras. Peregrine kept his hand on the gate until the dust had fallen. When he turned, Verity was still in the yard. Her fingers had closed around the 2 keys at her waist. "Would you rather be alone," he asked, "or would you have me sit on the porch?" Her throat moved before she answered. "I would have you at supper. The stew will not improve by waiting." He washed at the pump and sat in the place she had made for him. He did not tell her what the lost order would cost. She had asked him to keep Webb outside, and he had done it. She owed no accounting for the price of his own decision. The following evening, the crew left early for the bunkhouse. Peregrine rose from the table and reached for his hat. Verity had been wiping the counter. "Do the remounts change after dark?" "Not usually." "Then why do you inspect them 3 times every evening?" He looked toward the door. "Because something may be wrong. And who notices when something is wrong with you?" The question was plain, almost practical. It still caught him unprepared. "I have food wages, sound stock, and men who do their work," he said. "That was not what I asked either." Peregrine set his hat down. The kitchen held the remains of supper. 2 plates, a bowl turned upside down to dry the faint smell of coffee. Nothing in the room was costly. Nothing had come from a contract or a purchase he could point to with pride. Yet for 3 nights he had arranged his work, so he would not miss this hour. Verity rested the cloth over the edge of the basin. "I am not afraid of labor, Mr. Watson. I am afraid of being welcome only while I am useful. A person can work herself hollow, trying to prove she deserves the room where she sleeps." He thought of the pitcher outside her door, untouched, until he had walked away. He thought of the way she counted every biscuit, as though waste might be used against her. "I built this place so I would not owe anyone," he said. "Then I kept every decision in my own hands. I suppose men learned to bring me completed work and hide the trouble that came before it. Verity watched him without rescuing him from the admission. What would change that he asked? The men report to me before supper. Short stores, late riders, guests, anything that changes the table. You do not correct me before them unless there is danger. If we differ, we speak after. It cost him more than handing over a key. A key could be taken back. This required him to leave a decision standing when his first instinct was to take hold of it. "All right," he said. "I will tell them in the morning." He picked up his hat, then stopped. Sunday afternoon, I ride to the Mesquite Ridge. There is no stock there to inspect and no business to discuss. I would be pleased by your company. Verity's eyes lifted to his. "May I choose my own horse? You may reject every horse I own if you like. I doubt I will need to be so severe." A small smile appeared. "I will go." The promise of the ride stayed with Peregrine through the next morning. It made him foolishly aware of Sunday as something other than a mark in the work week. Then Gus entered the kitchen with his hat in his hands. "The freight wagon stopped in Las Piedras," he said. Cassidy spoke to the supplier. "They held our flour, coffee, and salt until Watson pays cash. Next wagon is not due for 7 days. He hesitated before adding, "The driver would not look me in the eye." "Cassidy has been saying at the eating house that you will send Miss Parrish back when the coffee runs out. The storekeeper depends on stage custom and will not cross him without cash in hand." The rumor made the room feel smaller. Webb no longer stood at the gate, but his words had reached the store counter, the freight bench, and every man who waited for a meal in Las Piedras. Peregrine was already calculating the ride to Tucson, the time needed to purchase goods, the burden on a pack animal, and the water he would lose from the remount rotation by being gone. "I can reach Tucson by evening," he said. "Buy the stores tomorrow and return the following day. And leave Gus with the water rotation during the hottest 2 days of the week," Verity said. Gus rubbed his jaw. "I can manage it, but the west tank has been falling faster than I like." Peregrine disliked every part of the choice. Money had solved most difficulties in his life because he had always been willing to work long enough to earn it. Here, spending more would only move the strain from the kitchen to the horses. Verity opened the storeroom and pointed to the shelves. "There is enough for 7 days if I cut coffee, make cornbread instead of biscuits, and know exactly who will eat. I can do it. But not while you stand behind me changing the measure." He looked at her. "If the men object, they may object to me." She touched the iron key. "They may still obey the kitchen count." Peregrine turned to Gus. "For the next week, Miss Parrish decides the meals and portions. Every man reports late work and guests before noon. No one takes stores without her leave, not even you." Gus sighed. "There goes the climate." Verity's mouth softened, but she did not laugh. The matter was too real for jokes to carry it. At noon, the crew gathered around the table. Peregrine stood near the door and kept silent. "The freight did not come through," Verity said. "Until the next wagon coffee is 1 cup in the morning. Biscuits are replaced by cornbread. Supper will be beans beef when we have it, and whatever vegetables can be brought from the garden patch. I will take the same portion as everyone here." A young hand near the end of the table muttered, "Taking kitchen orders from a bought bride." Forks stopped against tin plates. Gus lowered his cup without drinking, and every man at the table went still. Peregrine took 1 step forward. Heat struck through him so quickly that the man saw it and went pale. Then Peregrine stopped. This was Verity's table. If the hand threatened her, Peregrine would remove him. Insult was hers to answer unless she gave it over. She faced the young man. My wages are earned at this stove. Yours are earned in the saddle. You need not admire me. You will tell me how many meals you require and keep your hands out of the stores. The hand looked toward Peregrine and found no escape there. Gus removed his hat. I will need a late plate tomorrow, Miss Parrish. South pasture. One after another, the others gave their counts. Peregrine stepped back against the wall. He had wanted to protect her by making the insult disappear. Instead, he watched her make her authority stand. For the next several days, the kitchen ran lean but not grim. Verity soaked beans before dawn, used drippings carefully, and sent the men out with cornbread wrapped in cloth. She did not pretend scarcity was charming. She simply made every measure answer to a name and a meal. At supper, she waited until plates were filled, then asked what would be short by the next sundown. The first night, no one answered. The second, Gus mentioned the west tank valve. The third, a hand reported a worn cinch before it broke beneath a rider. Peregrine repaired nothing himself. He assigned the work and stayed at the table until every man had spoken. The change unsettled him in a way he had not expected. He had spent years being the first person told after something went wrong. Verity was making it possible to speak while trouble was still small. On Thursday, the young hand who had insulted her lingered near the stove after the others sat down. Miss Parrish, he said quietly, the roan mare on the south rotation has been off her feed since yesterday. She keeps looking at her flank. I thought Mr. Watson would say I had ridden her too hard. Verity did not claim knowledge she did not have. She set down the ladle and rang the yard bell twice. Peregrine and Gus came at once. The mare stood sweating, though the evening had cooled. Peregrine listened to her belly, checked her gums, and saw where she had tried to lie down. They removed her feed, walked her in short turns, offered water, and watched her through the night. By dawn, she had eased, though Peregrine kept her out of rotation for several days. Had the hand remained silent, the mare might have been harnessed to the next stage team while already ill. The loss would have reached beyond one horse. The first warning was the long squeal of an ungreased wheel beyond the corrals. Then the freight wagon rolled into the yard under a sheet of dust, carrying flour, salt, lamp oil, and less coffee than ordered. The flour sack struck the storeroom floor with a heavy welcome thump. Peregrine paid cash from the remaining reserve. As the driver lowered the last sack, he said, without meeting Verity's eyes, that folks in town had expected Watson Ranch to give in before the week was out. It did not, Verity said, and began counting the flour. She wrote every new measure on her slate. The week of short rations was finished. No one cheered. Gus merely poured himself a full cup the next morning and regarded it with the solemn gratitude of a man reunited with family. Before sunrise, Peregrine found Verity alone in the kitchen, shaping corn cakes for the early riders. The lamp was turned low. Her hair had loosened at one temple, and the room smelled of coffee strong enough to make Gus forgive the world. Peregrine stopped at the storeroom threshold. May I come in? Verity glanced at him, then at the open door between them. This is the storeroom, not my room. I was told the stores were yours. They are. She moved aside. You may come in. He entered and reached toward the shelf, then paused. The coffee. Second tin. The salt is above it. Her hand stilled over the dough. You learned. I have been paying attention. He measured coffee into the pot without spilling half of it, which he considered proof of progress. Verity watched in silence until he set the tin back in the proper place. Do not look so astonished, he said. I am trying to decide whether to tell Mr. Rogers. That would damage my standing. The joke passed gently between them and was gone. Peregrine carried the pot to the stove. Verity turned the cakes. For several minutes they worked without needing to fill the quiet. He had once believed companionship meant someone preventing silence. With her, silence no longer felt like an empty room. It felt shared. When the coffee was ready, Verity filled 2 cups before the crew arrived. She took the chipped one and left the unbroken cup for him. Peregrine traded them. "You found it first," he said. "It was placed for you. Then sit where it was placed." Verity looked toward the yard. No bell had rung. No one required her yet. She sat across from him, both hands around the warm cup. Peregrine had a dozen matters waiting the west tank, the recovered mare the horse's Webb's buyer had refused. For the length of 1 cup, he let them wait. That night, Peregrine washed at the kitchen basin and sat without waiting for Verity to point to his chair. The unchipped cup stood beside his plate. "You kept her from going out sick," he said. "I rang the bell. You made him willing to speak before he had a dead horse to explain." Verity folded a towel. "You listened when he did." The answer struck him with unexpected force. She did not take his place. She had made a better place for him to stand. Peregrine moved the cup closer. "Does the invitation to the ridge still hold you?" Gave the invitation. "I have spent the week discovering that invitations may be withdrawn." Verity untied her apron. "This one has not been." They rode after the worst heat had gone. Verity chose a small bay mare with a calm eye and rejected his help with the girth only after checking it herself. Peregrine did not take offense. She had accepted his hand at the buckboard, his gait, his roof, and his word. Her refusal of one small assistance did not erase the rest. The Mesquite Ridge offered no grand view by territorial standards, only open desert, long shadows, and mountains turning violet in the distance. It was enough. They spoke first of ordinary things. Verity asked why one remount wore a bell. Peregrine told her the horse opened latches and led the others into the hay. She said the animal appeared qualified for management. Peregrine laughed and realized she had made him forget to guard the silence. At the ridge, they dismounted and stood beside the horses. "What would you do with your wages?" he asked. "Some for a stage seat, some for a midday table in Las Piedras. Travelers arrive hungry between the eating house meals. I know how to cook for people who have 10 minutes and dust on everything they own." It was the first future she had named that did not begin with escape. "You could use my buckboard 1 day a week," he said. "At the same hire I charge the store for hauling, so no one mistakes it for a gift with conditions." Verity studied his face. "You are learning. Slowly. Slow may hold better." He wanted to tell her that the ranch had begun to feel different when her bell rang. He wanted to ask whether she heard that difference too. But the month was not finished, and her fare still waited in the iron box. Any declaration made while she depended on his roof would carry more weight than he wished to put upon her. So he stood beside her in the cooling wind and let restraint become the honest thing rather than the easy one. When they returned, the stage driver was watering his team near the remount shed. He tipped his hat to Verity. "Miss Parrish, a northbound seat has opened on the last run of the month. I heard you might be leaving. Hold it for me until noon that day," Verity said. "My fare is ready." The words were practical. They still struck Peregrine like a door closing in a distant room. Over the remaining days, her possible absence appeared everywhere: the cup, the slate beside the stove, the bell rope in the evening wind. He had tried to fill a position. Verity had changed how men spoke when he came indoors and what a place at his table meant. He did not ask her decision early. On the 30th morning, Verity's valise stood by the kitchen door. She wore a dark blue traveling dress. The storeroom was in order. The breakfast dishes were dry, and both keys rested beside the unchipped cup. Peregrine entered carrying a leather pouch and a stage ticket. His chest tightened at the sight of the valise, but he did not move it, and did not stand between her and the door. He put the pouch on the table. 30 days' wages in full. He placed the ticket beside it. Your fare. The room remains yours until the stage comes, whether you stay or go. Verity rested one hand on the back of the chair he had learned to use. You have kept every term. At Las Piedras, you asked what the $100 bought. She waited. It bought the return of your valise and a clear road away from Cassidy, Peregrine said. Nothing beyond that. The confession he had postponed for a month no longer felt like a risk he could avoid without becoming dishonest. I went to Las Piedras because I wanted a wife who could cook. I thought the want was practical. I thought if I paid fairly and provided well, a house would become a home by agreement. He looked down at the hand braced on the table and drew one slow breath before continuing. But I do not want you here because you can stretch flour or make men speak before trouble grows. I want you here because I listen for your bell. I change my work to reach this table. When I picture the room without you, it is not the meals I miss first. Verity's fingers tightened on the chair, but she did not look away. I am asking permission to court you, he continued. If you take the stage, the wages and fare are still yours. If you stay, they remain yours. I will call at the porch like any other suitor. I will not make employment the price of your answer. She glanced at the valise, the ticket, and the 2 keys. I have conditions, she said. Name them. I keep my wages. I keep charge of the kitchen while I work here. Once a week, I take the buckboard to Las Piedras and serve a midday meal under my own name. And I keep the stage money even if I do not use it now. Agreed. You answered before I finished thinking of another. I can wait while you find it. For the first time that morning, she smiled. Then I will stay for 1 season, she said. You may court me during it. At the end, I will decide again. Relief drove both his hands to the table. Her answer was not forever, which made it more precious. She could choose again because the first choice had been free. May I kiss you, Verity? Yes. He crossed the small distance between them. The kiss was brief, steady, and gentler than the hope he had carried all morning. When he drew back, Verity's hand remained against his sleeve. Outside the stage, bells sounded on the road. Neither of them moved toward the door. 3 months later, Watson Ranch kept a different rhythm. Webb Cassidy never restored the 4-horse order. Peregrine found 2 smaller buyers and reduced 1 expansion he had planned for winter. The loss remained a loss. Principle had not made it vanish. Yet the ranch stood, the hands were paid, and fewer troubles reached him after they had grown teeth. Every Thursday, Verity drove the buckboard to Las Piedras, with covered pots, bread, and a chalkboard listing the day's meal. The coins she earned went into a jar bearing her name. Peregrine charged the same wagon hire. He charged the store, then spent more than was sensible, buying his own lunch from her table. Gus continued to claim 1 biscuit for the night watch. He now announced it before supper and accepted Verity's count with the solemnity of a man reporting cattle. One evening, the bell rang across the yard. The hands came in talking about a stray calf and a latch-opening remount. Peregrine entered first and took 2 ironstone plates from the shelf. He set one at his place. He set the second beside it and put the unchipped cup between them. For years he had called his isolation independence, because the word sounded strong and cost him nothing. Verity had given the emptiness its proper name. It had been loneliness, not because no one worked beside him, but because he had left no room for another person to change the life he had built. She came in from the porch, untied her apron, and noticed the second plate. From beneath her arm, she drew the small slate used at her town table. On its back, she had written in careful chalk, "Sunday after sundown." She handed it to him. "For your next call on the porch." Peregrine took the slate. His thumb brushed her knuckles, and this time neither of them withdrew at once. He had paid to put her own valise back in her hands. Everything after that had been hers to give.